A man saved a pregnant dog, but what the dog did next is heartbreaking. Marcus Webb had been a wildlife veterinarian in the Dandenong Ranges for 15 years, and he thought he'd seen everything. Injured wallabies, sick wombats, birds caught in fencing wire. But nothing had prepared him for the call that came through on a Tuesday afternoon in late autumn. "Marcus, it's Jenny from the ranger station. We've got a situation up on Ridge Road. Pregnant dog, looks like a yellow lab, been hit by a car. She's alive, but in bad shape. Owner nowhere to be found." Marcus grabbed his field kit and headed out in his ute. Ridge Road was a narrow, winding track through dense bushland, the kind of place where people sometimes dumped unwanted animals thinking they'd find a home or live wild. More often, those animals starved, got hit by cars, or fell prey to foxes. When he arrived at the scene, Marcus's jaw tightened. The dog was lying in the middle of the road, her golden coat matted with blood and dirt. She was heavily pregnant, her belly swollen and low. A ranger was directing traffic around her, and another stood nearby with a blanket. But what caught Marcus's attention was the second dog. Another yellow Labrador male sitting about 3 meters away. He wasn't injured, but he wasn't leaving either. Every time the rangers tried to approach the pregnant female, the male would stand, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "He won't let us near her. Been like this for 20 minutes. We tried to coax him away with food, but he's not budging." Marcus approached slowly, hands visible, speaking in the calm, low voice he used with frightened animals. "Easy, mate. I'm here to help. I know you're scared, but your girl needs medical attention." The male lab watched him with intelligent brown eyes, assessing. Marcus stopped a few meters away and crouched down, making himself less threatening. He could see the pregnant dog was breathing but unconscious, blood seeping from a wound on her hind leg. "She's hurt badly. If I don't help her now, she's going to die. Her puppies too. Is that what you want?" It was ridiculous, talking to a dog as if he could understand complex concepts, but Marcus had learned over the years that tone mattered more than words, and sometimes animals seemed to grasp more than people gave them credit for. The male lab whined, looking from Marcus to the injured female and back again. His whole body was tense with conflict, protect his mate or allow help. Finally, he took 2 steps back, not far, but enough. "Good boy. That's it. I'm just going to check her over." Marcus moved carefully to the pregnant dog's side. Up close, he could see she was in worse shape than he'd thought. The leg wound was deep, possibly a fractured femur from the impact. She was in shock, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her gums were pale, internal bleeding almost certainly. But worse than all that was her belly. It was tight, contracting irregularly. She was going into premature labor, probably triggered by the trauma of the accident. Those puppies were coming whether she was ready or not, whether she survived or not. "Right, we need to move her now. Get the tarp and help me lift her into the back of my ute." The rangers moved in to help, and immediately the male lab was there, growling, placing himself between them and the injured female. "Mate, you're not making this easier." Marcus tried again, but the dog wouldn't budge. Then Marcus had an idea. He opened the back of his ute, lowering the tailgate. "Look, see? We're taking her somewhere safe, somewhere she can get help. You can come too if you want, but she needs to get in here." He patted the truck bed, and to his amazement, the male lab jumped up into it. He stood in the back, looking down at the pregnant female, then back at Marcus, as if to say, "Well, get on with it then." With the male's permission apparently granted, they carefully lifted the injured dog onto the tarp and slid her into the back of the ute. The male immediately lay down beside her, pressing close, his head resting protectively on her neck. Marcus drove as fast as he dared on the winding road, watching in his rearview mirror as the male lab stayed glued to his mate's side. Every bump made him wince, knowing it was causing her pain, but speed was more important than comfort now. At his clinic, a modest building attached to his house that served as both wildlife rescue and small animal practice. Marcus called his assistant, Priya, who arrived within 10 minutes. Together, they carried the pregnant dog inside and onto the examination table. The male lab followed, refusing to leave. "And Marcus, he can't be in here during treatment. He's not leaving her, trust me, I tried. Let him stay for now." Marcus worked quickly, starting an IV line, administering fluids and pain medication. He x-rayed the leg, fractured femur as suspected, and checked her abdomen with ultrasound. His heart sank at what he saw. 7 puppies, all alive for now, but they're in distress. She's dilating. We've got maybe an hour before they start coming. Can she survive a C-section in her condition? Barely. But if we don't do it, she and the puppies will all die. The internal bleeding isn't severe yet, but it will be if we wait. Marcus prepped for surgery while Priya monitored the dog's vitals. Through it all, the male lab watched from the corner where they'd convinced him to wait, his eyes never leaving his mate. "You know what's weird," Priya said quietly as they worked. "Look at them, both yellow labs, both well-fed despite being strays. Same age, roughly. They're bonded, properly bonded. This wasn't some random mating. These two belong together." Marcus had noticed the same thing. These weren't feral dogs or recent dumps. They were healthy, well-socialized, clearly devoted to each other, which meant someone had owned them, had cared for them, and then, lost them. Abandoned them when the pregnancy became inconvenient. The thought made Marcus's blood boil, but he pushed his anger aside and focused on the surgery. The pregnant dog, he'd started thinking of her as Goldie, though she'd need a proper name, was under anesthesia now, her breathing supported by the ventilator Priya monitored carefully. Marcus made the incision, working with practiced precision. The first puppy came out mewling, tiny and perfect. Then the second, the third. Priya took each one, clearing their airways, rubbing them with towels to stimulate breathing. By the 6th puppy, Marcus was starting to believe they might actually save them all. Then he saw the problem. The 7th puppy was caught, positioned wrong, and removing it had caused more internal bleeding. Goldie's blood pressure was dropping. "Marcus, we're losing her. BP's at 60/40 and dropping." Marcus's hands moved faster, cauterizing bleeders, delivering the 7th puppy, smaller than the others, not breathing. He handed it to Priya while he worked to control the hemorrhaging inside Goldie's abdomen. "Come on, girl, stay with me. You've got 7 babies who need you." Behind him, Marcus heard Priya working on the tiny puppy, rubbing vigorously, clearing its airway. Then, finally, a weak cry. All 7 puppies were alive, but their mother was crashing. Marcus administered clotting agents, gave her a blood transfusion from his emergency supply, stitched and cauterized as fast as he dared. Her heart rate was erratic, her breathing depressed even with the ventilator. From the corner, the male lab suddenly stood. He'd been quiet throughout the surgery, but now he moved forward, pushing past Priya to get closer to the table. Normally, Marcus would have stopped him, maintained sterile protocol, but something in the dog's eyes made him pause. The male lab pressed his nose against Goldie's face, whining softly. Then he did something extraordinary. He began licking her muzzle, her ears, making soft woofing sounds, and Goldie's heart rate stabilized, just slightly, but enough. "He's bringing her back." Priya's voice was awed. "Marcus, he's literally calling her back." Marcus had seen bonded animals do remarkable things, but this was something else. He finished closing the incision, administering more medications, and watched as Goldie's vitals slowly, gradually improved. Not out of danger, but no longer actively dying. They moved her to recovery, all 7 puppies tucked in a warming box beside her. The male lab lay down next to the recovery crate, his vigil continuing. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, wouldn't leave her side. "We should try to find their owners," Priya said, cleaning up the surgery suite. "Dogs this well-trained, this bonded. Someone's missing them." Marcus had already been thinking the same thing. He took photos, posted them to local lost pet groups, contacted the ranger station to check for reports. Then he sat down with his laptop and started making calls. It took 3 hours, but finally he got a hit. An elderly couple in Belgrave, 10 kilometers away, had reported 2 yellow labs missing 4 days ago. Their names were Honey and Bear. They'd escaped during a thunderstorm, squeezed through a gap in the fence the couple didn't know existed. Marcus rang them immediately. "Mr. Patterson, this is Marcus Webb from Dandenong Veterinary Clinic. I believe I have your dogs." The relief in the old man's voice was palpable. But when Marcus explained about the accident, the pregnancy, the surgery, there was a long silence. "We didn't know she was pregnant. We thought, Honey's 8 years old. We thought she was past breeding age. Oh God, is she going to be all right? She's critical but stable. The puppies are all alive. But Mr. Patterson, she's going to need extensive care. The surgery, the recovery, 7 puppies to nurse. Whatever it costs, whatever she needs, those dogs are our family." The Pattersons arrived within the hour. Frank and Dorothy, both in their 70s, moving with the careful slowness of people dealing with arthritis and age. Dorothy started crying the moment she saw Bear in the recovery area. "Oh, Bear, you stayed with her. Good boy. Such a good boy." Frank knelt beside Honey's crate, his weathered hand reaching through the bars to stroke her head. She was still unconscious, but her tail twitched slightly at his touch. "We've had them since they were puppies. Litter mates, actually, brother and sister. Got them the same week Dorothy was diagnosed with her cancer, 8 years back. They got us through the treatment, the recovery, everything." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Mr. Patterson, did you say brother and sister?" "Yes." "Why? The puppies. They're the result of—" Frank, Honey and Bear are the parents. The implications hung heavy in the air. Inbreeding. The puppies could have serious genetic problems, health issues, shortened lifespans. It wasn't the dog's fault. They were just following instinct, but the consequences could be severe. Dorothy sank into a chair, her face pale. "Oh no, those poor babies. Are they going to be all right? Too early to tell." Marcus tried to be honest but gentle. "Some might be perfectly healthy. Others might have issues. We won't know for weeks, maybe months. And homes." Frank's voice was heavy. "Who's going to want puppies with potential health problems? We can't keep 7 puppies, not at our age, not in our small house." Marcus had been wondering the same thing. Finding homes for healthy puppies was easy. Finding homes for puppies with question marks over their futures, nearly impossible. Most would end up in shelters, and with their background, might be deemed unadoptable. Over the next 3 days, Marcus monitored Honey closely. She regained consciousness, was able to nurse her puppies with assistance, but she was weak. The trauma of the accident and surgery had taken a serious toll. Her fractured leg required another surgery to place pins, which meant more anesthesia, more risk to a dog whose body was already struggling. Bear never left her side, except when Marcus physically removed him for bathroom breaks and food. Even then, he'd bolt his meal and rush back to Honey, pressing close to her, grooming her, encouraging the puppies to nurse when Honey was too exhausted to respond. The puppies thrived despite everything. 7 perfect yellow bundles, eyes still closed, squeaking and squirming in their warming box. Priya had named them after Australian wildflowers: wattle, banksia, waratah, grevillea, bottlebrush, flannel flower, and the smallest, the one who'd nearly died, she called Billy Button. On the 4th day, when Honey was finally strong enough to stand with support, Marcus watched as Bear helped her. The male lab positioned himself beside her, letting her lean on him as she shakily moved from the crate to the puppy box. He stayed there, supporting her weight, until she'd settled down with all 7 puppies tucked against her. "I've never seen anything like it," Priya whispered. "He knows exactly what she needs. It's like they're communicating without words. They've been together their whole lives." Marcus watched the pair with something like awe. Probably the only constant each has ever known. Of course they understand each other perfectly, but understanding wasn't going to solve their problems. Honey needed months of recovery. The puppies needed homes. And the Pattersons, despite their obvious love for their dogs, were struggling with the reality of the situation. Marcus found Frank in the waiting room the next morning, his head in his hands. "I don't know what to do. The surgery costs alone are going to wipe out our savings. And we want to keep Honey and Bear. We love them. But 7 puppies, even if we could afford to keep them all until they're weaned, we can't keep them long term. Our house is too small. We're too old. What if I helped find homes, vetted families who understand the potential health issues? Who's going to want them, Marcus? Be honest. Puppies from sibling parents, possible genetic problems, medical needs. We'll be lucky if the shelter doesn't just put them down." The words hung heavy in the air. Marcus knew Frank was right. Shelters were overcrowded, resources stretched thin. Puppies with health concerns often became liabilities that facilities couldn't afford to manage long term. "Let me make some calls. I know people in rescue organizations, foster networks. Give me a week." But a week turned into 2, and Marcus's inquiries hit the same wall everywhere. Organizations were sympathetic but practical. They had wait lists of healthy puppies needing homes. Taking on 7 with potential genetic issues wasn't feasible. During this time, Honey continued her recovery. The leg was healing, though she'd always have a slight limp. More concerning was her energy level. She was exhausted, struggling to produce enough milk for 7 hungry puppies. Marcus supplemented with bottle feeding, and Priya spent hours helping, but it wasn't enough. Bear compensated in ways that broke Marcus's heart. The male lab would clean the puppies obsessively, keeping them warm when Honey needed to rest, even attempting to move them closer to her when they cried. He'd lost weight, still barely eating. His entire existence focused on his sister and their offspring. "He's going to make himself sick," Priya said on week 3. "Marcus, he can't keep going like this." That evening, Marcus sat in his office long after Priya had gone home. Staring at his computer screen, he'd posted the puppies' story on social media, been honest about their background and potential issues. The post had been shared thousands of times, but actual adoption inquiries, 0. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. "Marcus Webb? My name's Caroline Mitchell. I'm a genetics researcher at Melbourne University. I saw your post about the lab puppies." Marcus's heart sank. A researcher probably wanted to study them, document their genetic problems for science. "I'm not interested in turning these puppies into lab subjects. No, you misunderstand. I want to help. I've been researching genetic diversity in dog populations for 10 years. What happened with these puppies? Accidental sibling breeding. It's more common than people think, especially with escaped pets. And you know what? The outcomes aren't always catastrophic." "What do you mean?" "Inbreeding increases the risk of genetic problems." "Yes, but it doesn't guarantee them. I'd like to run genetic panels on all 7 puppies, completely free of charge. Map their genetics, identify any immediate concerns, give potential adopters actual data instead of just fear." Marcus felt a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. "And if the results show problems, then we deal with it. But Marcus, I've studied hundreds of cases. Sometimes these puppies are perfectly healthy. Sometimes they have minor issues easily managed. And yes, sometimes there are serious problems, but we won't know until we test." Caroline arrived the next day with her equipment. Drawing blood from 7 3-week-old puppies was an adventure, but she managed it with expertise and patience. Bear watched suspiciously the entire time, only relaxing when Honey nuzzled him reassuringly. "Results will take about 10 days. In the meantime, keep documenting their development, temperament, physical milestones, any concerns. It all helps build the picture. Those 10 days were agonizing. Marcus watched the puppies obsessively, noting every movement, every behavior. They seemed normal, playing, nursing, growing at expected rates, but normal didn't mean healthy. Honey was improving, finally able to walk short distances, beginning to act more like herself. Bear had started eating regularly again, though he still maintained his protective vigil. The Pattersons visited daily, bringing treats, helping with care, their love for their dogs evident in every interaction. "Whatever happens with the puppies," Dorothy said one afternoon, watching Bear groom Honey with patient dedication, "we're keeping these too. I don't care what it costs or how much work it is. They're family." Frank nodded agreement, and Marcus felt his respect for the elderly couple deepen. They could have surrendered the dogs, claimed they couldn't handle the situation. Instead, they were stepping up, despite their age and limited resources. When Caroline finally called with results, Marcus put her on speaker so Priya could hear. "Right. I've got good news and complicated news. The good news is that 5 of the 7 puppies show no genetic markers for serious hereditary diseases. Their inbreeding coefficient is elevated, which means they're more susceptible to recessive traits, but nothing has actually manifested. They should live normal, healthy lives with regular vet care." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. And the complicated news? 2 puppies, Billy Button and Waratah, both have heart murmurs. Not severe, but present. They'll need cardiology workups, likely medication, potentially surgery. And Billy Button, the small one, also has hip dysplasia markers. She'll need careful management, weight control, possibly hip surgery down the track. Medical issues, significant ones, the kind that made puppies unadoptable. How much are we talking? Treatment costs for Billy Button over her lifetime could be $15,000 to $20,000. For Waratah, maybe $10,000 if the heart condition stays mild. Marcus closed his eyes. Those 2 puppies had just gone from difficult to adopt to virtually impossible. "But here's the thing," Caroline continued. "I've already found someone who wants Billy Button. My colleague's daughter has been looking for a special needs dog to train as a therapy animal. She's got experience, resources, and she specifically wants a dog with challenges. She saw your post weeks ago and has been waiting for the genetic results." That's wonderful. 1 down. "As for Waratah, I might have a lead. Let me make some calls." After hanging up, Marcus looked at Priya. 5 healthy puppies. That's better than we hoped. "But what about the other 6? Even the healthy ones are going to be hard to place." Marcus knew she was right. But that evening, something unexpected happened. Frank Patterson called. "Marcus, Dorothy and I have been talking. We're 73 and 75. We probably shouldn't be taking this on. But we want to keep one of the puppies, to remember this whole experience, to have a piece of Honey and Bear's legacy. Would that be all right? Frank, you don't have to. We want to. Which one needs us most?" Marcus thought about it. The 5 healthy puppies would be easiest to place. Billy Button was spoken for. That left Waratah, the puppy with the heart murmur. Waratah. She's got a heart condition, needs medication, monitoring, eventual cardiology assessment. But she's sweet, calm, the gentlest of the litter. Perfect. We'll manage. We've got good pet insurance. And at our age, what else are we going to spend our money on? Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly to find homes for the remaining 5 puppies. He screened every applicant carefully, was honest about the elevated inbreeding risk, required commitment to regular vet checks. One by one, homes emerged. A retired veterinary nurse took Wattle. A family whose previous lab had died of old age took Banksia and Grevilla together, unwilling to separate the bonded sisters. A young couple passionate about dog sports took Bottlebrush. And Flannel Flower went to a school for special needs children, where she'd be a classroom therapy dog. By 6 weeks old, all 7 puppies had homes. Impossible odds, beaten by persistence, honesty, and people willing to take a chance. The day came to send the puppies to their new homes. Marcus had arranged for all the adoptive families to come at the same time, wanting them to meet each other, to form a support network. The clinic was crowded with people, excitement and chaos, as 7 8-week-old puppies tumbled around the waiting room. But amidst the celebration, Marcus noticed something that made his chest tighten. Bear and Honey were both in the recovery area, which had become their space over the past 2 months. Bear was lying with his head on Honey's back, watching the puppies through the glass partition, and he was shaking. Marcus slipped away from the crowd and entered the recovery area. Up close, he could see Bear was trembling all over, his eyes fixed on the puppies, a low, continuous whine coming from his throat. "Hey, mate, I know. This is hard." Marcus sat beside the 2 labs. Honey was calmer but clearly distressed, her ears back, her tail tucked. She'd been an attentive mother, and now her babies were leaving, but Bear's reaction was more intense. He tried to stand, to go to the puppies, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He collapsed back down, the whining turning into soft, broken sounds that were heartbreakingly close to crying. They're going to good homes, the best homes. They'll be loved and safe. But even as Marcus said it, he understood. Bear didn't comprehend adoption or forever homes. He only understood that his babies, his and Honey's babies, were disappearing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Dorothy came in then, drawn by Bear's distress. She knelt beside him, her arthritic knees protesting, and wrapped her arms around the big dog's neck. "Oh, Bear, sweet boy, you've been such a good dad." "The best dad." Bear pressed his face into her shoulder, his whole body shuddering. Frank joined them, sitting heavily on the floor beside Honey, stroking her head as she leaned against him. "We're keeping Waratah. You'll see her all the time. And the others, they'll have good lives. You saved them, Bear. When Honey got hit, when everything went wrong, you stayed with her. You protected her. You called her back when she was dying. Those puppies exist because of you." Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. He'd delivered countless animals over the years, rehomed hundreds, but this felt different. Bear and Honey weren't just dogs. They were devoted partners who'd been through something traumatic together, who'd created life in circumstances that should have been impossible, who'd defied every odd. One by one, the families came to say goodbye before leaving. They brought their new puppies to see Bear and Honey, letting the parents sniff them, have one last moment. Bear nuzzled each puppy, his tongue gently cleaning them one final time. Honey licked their faces, memorizing their scent. When Billy Button was brought over, the smallest, the one who'd nearly died, Bear did something that made everyone in the room fall silent. He picked her up gently in his mouth, the way he'd carried her from the warming box to Honey countless times, and held her there for a long moment. Then he carefully set her down and stepped back, as if giving permission for her to go. The woman adopting Billy Button was crying openly. "I promise you, I'll send photos every week. She'll have the best life, I swear it." Finally, only Waratah remained. The Pattersons had brought a soft carrier for the journey home. As Dorothy placed the puppy inside, Waratah whimpered, and both Bear and Honey stood, pressing against the carrier. "She's coming home with us. She'll be your little sister. You'll see her every single day." And they would. The Pattersons had arranged for regular visits to Marcus's clinic for Waratah's cardiology checks. Bear and Honey would come too, would watch their daughter grow up even as they said goodbye to the others. 2 weeks after the adoptions, Marcus received the first update email. It was from the family with Banksia and Grevilla, with photos of the 2 puppies playing in their new backyard, already inseparable. Then came updates from the others, Wattle settling in beautifully with her veterinary nurse owner, Bottlebrush excelling at agility training, Flannel Flower bringing joy to classroom after classroom of children who needed her gentle presence, and Billy Button, The puppy with the worst prognosis, the one everyone had feared would suffer, was thriving. Her new owner had started a social media account documenting her journey, and it had gained thousands of followers inspired by the little dog's resilience. Marcus showed the updates to Bear and Honey during one of their visits. He held his phone so they could see the photos, not really expecting them to understand. But Bear's tail wagged when he saw images of the puppies, and Honey made soft, interested sounds. "They're happy, all of them, because you two refused to give up." 3 months after the accident, Honey was completely recovered. The limp was barely noticeable. Her energy was back, and she'd regained the weight she'd lost. Bear had also recovered his condition, his coat glossy again, his eyes bright. But the real transformation was in their relationship with the Pattersons. The elderly couple had moved Waratah into their home, and the dynamic had shifted. Before, Honey and Bear had been beloved pets. Now they were part of something more, a family that had been through crisis together and emerged stronger. Waratah's heart condition was being managed with medication. The murmur hadn't worsened, and the cardiologist was cautiously optimistic. She was a gentle, sweet-natured dog who seemed to understand her elderly owner's limitations and adjusted her energy accordingly. "She's perfect for us," Dorothy told Marcus during a checkup. "And you know what's beautiful? Every time we look at her, we see Honey and Bear, their best qualities combined." 6 months after the rescue, Marcus organized a reunion. He invited all the adoptive families to bring the puppies, now gangly adolescents, back to his clinic for a gathering. Not everyone could make it, but 5 of the 7 puppies came, along with Bear, Honey, and Waratah. The chaos was magnificent. 7 young labs tumbling over each other, playing with the abandon of puppies who'd once been littermates and still remembered. But what struck Marcus most was Bear and Honey's reaction. They moved through the crowd of young dogs, sniffing each one, tails wagging, making sounds of recognition and joy. They remembered, despite everything, despite the trauma and separation, they knew these were their puppies. Billy Button, now bigger and stronger than anyone had dared hope, bounded up to Bear and rolled onto her back in submission, just as she'd done as a tiny puppy. Bear play-bowed, and they romped together like he was young again. Honey found Banksia and Grevilea and settled down with them pressed against her sides, exactly the way she used to nurse them. The 2 adolescent dogs seemed to relax into the familiar position, some deep memory surfacing. "This is what it's all about," Caroline said, standing beside Marcus, taking notes for her research. "Not just genetic outcomes or medical interventions. This family connection, love that transcends logic." As the reunion wound down and families began to leave, Marcus watched the Pattersons load Waratah, Bear, and Honey into their car. 3 generations, bound by circumstance and choice. Frank rolled down the window before driving off. "You know what the heartbreaking part is, Marcus. Not the accident or the surgery or even saying goodbye to the puppies. It's knowing how close we came to never knowing this love. If Bear hadn't stayed with Honey on that road, if you hadn't stopped, if we'd decided we were too old for this, we would have missed all of it." Marcus understood. The heartbreak wasn't in the tragedy, it was in how easily it could have ended differently, how one choice, one moment of compassion or cowardice could alter everything. That evening, alone in his clinic, Marcus pulled up the photos from the reunion. 7 healthy, happy dogs who shouldn't have existed, who'd overcome genetic odds, medical complications, and a world that hadn't wanted them, who'd found homes because people chose to see past the risks to the love underneath. And at the center of it all, 2 golden labs who'd loved each other so completely that they'd created life, defied death, and shown everyone around them what devotion really meant. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy with a photo. Bear and Honey curled up together on their dog bed, Waratah wedged between them, all 3 sleeping peacefully. The caption read, "Family, complete." Marcus saved the photo and looked at it for a long time. He'd been a vet for 15 years, had saved countless animals. But this case had saved him too, had reminded him why he'd chosen this profession, not for the routine checkups or the predictable outcomes, but for moments like this, when love won despite impossible odds. The heartbreaking part wasn't the struggle. It was remembering there was a world where Bear might have left honey on that road, where Marcus might have driven past, where those puppies might never have drawn breath, but Bear had stayed. Marcus had stopped. The puppies had lived. And 7 families had opened their hearts to dogs the world said weren't worth the risk. That was the real story. Not that a man saved a pregnant dog, but that a dog's unwavering love had saved his mate, their puppies, and reminded everyone who witnessed it what truly mattered: devotion, hope, the stubborn, beautiful refusal to give up on those we love, no matter the cost.